April 18, 1945. A field of mud and shattered trees outside Wesel, Germany. The rain doesn't fall, it seeps from a sky the color of slate, a relentless, chilling mist that clings to everything. For Oberhelferin Anneliese Schmidt of the Luftwaffe Nachrichtenkorps, the world has shrunk to the sodden collar of her greatcoat and the rhythmic, sucking sound of boots pulling free from the glutinous earth. The air smells of defeat, a foul cocktail of wet wool, diesel exhaust, and the metallic tang of fear. The war is not ending with a bang, but with a long, drawn-out whimper. All around her is the wreckage of the Ruhr pocket, a cauldron of once proud Wehrmacht soldiers now reduced to hollow-eyed columns of men and women, shuffling west into the arms of the Americans. There are no more orders, no more signals to intercept, no more codes to decipher. The ether is silent. The only command left is to walk. Ahead, the column crests a low rise. Anneliese lifts her head, her blonde hair, matted and dark with rain, plastered to her forehead. Below them, the source of the engine noise becomes clear. A convoy of U.S. Army GMC trucks, their olive drab hoods slick with water, sits idling. Khaki-clad soldiers, helmets low, M1 Garand rifles held loosely but ready, watch the procession with an unnerving stillness. They are so young, these Americans. Younger than the newsreels had shown. Their faces are impassive, weary, but not cruel. It is a terrible kind of professional disinterest. To them, this is not the dramatic fall of a Reich, it is a long, tedious day of processing human inventory. You can see it in the way they stand, the way they chew their gum, the way their eyes scan the endless line of gray-green uniforms without really seeing the people inside them. Anneliese feels a knot tighten in her stomach, a cold dread that has nothing to do with the damp. This is the moment of transition. The moment you cease to be a soldier, an auxiliary, a citizen. The moment you become a prisoner. A sharp whistle cuts through the air. American officers, moving with an unhurried authority that seems alien after the frantic chaos of the past weeks, begin directing the flow. Men to the left. Women and medical staff to the right. The separation is swift, impersonal. Anneliese finds herself shunted into a smaller group of perhaps 200 women nurses in stained aprons, signals auxiliaries like herself, a few stern-faced Flakhelferinnen still wearing their determined scowls like a last piece of armor. She catches the eye of a girl, no older than 17, whose face is a mask of terrified confusion. Anneliese gives a slight, almost imperceptible nod. It is all the reassurance she can offer. A shared acknowledgement of the abyss. They are herded toward the trucks. A sergeant with a clipboard shouts out commands in heavily accented German, the words clumsy but the meaning unmistakable. Drop all weapons. No knives. No personal effects you cannot carry. Move quickly. The order is almost absurd. Who among them has a weapon left? Their only possessions are the clothes on their backs and the gnawing emptiness in their bellies. It has been 3 days since her last real meal, a stale piece of bread and a thin, greasy soup. Since then, nothing. Hunger is a constant, humming presence, a low-grade fever that dulls the senses and sharpens the edges of every fear. The truck bed is cold and wet. Metal rattles against metal as they are ordered to sit on the hard benches. Anneliese finds herself pressed between a grim-faced nurse and a young, frightened girl. No one speaks. The only sounds are the groan of the truck's transmission, the rhythmic slosh of water in the ruts of the road, and the soft, stifled sobs of the girl beside her. Anneliese stares out through the canvas flap at the back, watching the German landscape slide by, a landscape she suddenly feels she is seeing for the first time as a foreigner. Ruined farms. A church with its steeple blown away. A child's doll lying face down in a puddle. This is not the triumphant homeland from the propaganda posters. This is a cemetery. After what feels like an eternity, the truck lurches to a halt. The canvas is thrown back, and the flat, gray light floods in. Raus! Everybody out! Schnell! The command is harsh, impatient. They climb down, stiff and aching, into yet more mud. Before them is a vast, open field, enclosed by coils of fresh, gleaming barbed wire. Wooden watchtowers stand like skeletal sentinels at the corners. This is it. Their new world. A muddy patch of earth under an indifferent sky. As they are marched through the gate, a sound echoes behind them that will define the rest of their lives, the heavy, final clang of steel on steel. The lock turns. And for the first time, the hunger is no longer just a presence. It is the only thing that is real. The temporary prisoner of war enclosure near Remagen is not a camp. A camp implies structure, barracks, some semblance of order. This is simply a fenced-in portion of the Rhineland, a sprawling pen of mud and misery. For 2 days, Anneliese Schmidt has existed within its confines, and the initial shock of capture has evaporated, replaced by a monotonous, soul-crushing routine of waiting. Waiting for food. Waiting for news. Waiting for the rain to stop. It never does. The women have been segregated into one corner of the massive enclosure, separated from the tens of thousands of male prisoners by a single, token strand of wire. By day, they huddle together in small groups for warmth, their gray and blue uniforms blending into the bruised tones of the earth and sky. By night, they try to sleep in shallow, hand-dug trenches, covering themselves with their greatcoats as the cold seeps up from the ground, a damp, predatory thing that leaches the life from their bones. There is no shelter. No latrines. Only the endless expanse of churned mud and the equally endless expanse of sky. Anneliese has found a tentative companionship with 2 other women. One is Helga, a cynical, sharp-tongued Flakhelferin from Berlin, whose defiant glare seems to be her only defense against the despair that surrounds them. The other is Leni, the young girl from the truck, a former administrative clerk who seems to shrink with every passing hour, her eyes wide and perpetually on the verge of tears. They are trying to humiliate us, Helga mutters, her voice a low rasp. They are huddled together, trying to shield a small, sputtering fire made from a few damp twigs. The smoke is thin and acrid, leaving us out here like cattle. The Americans, they preach of civilization, but look at this. Anneliese says nothing. She watches the American guards patrol the perimeter. They are distant figures in their waterproof ponchos, their faces obscured by their helmet liners. They move with a lethargic, bored purpose, their boots making sucking sounds in the mud. They are not intentionally cruel, they are overwhelmed. The sheer number of prisoners from the collapsed Ruhr pocket over 300,000 has shattered the Allied logistical chain. There are not enough tents, not enough blankets, and, most critically, not enough food. But to the women inside the wire, this logistical failure feels deeply, personally malicious. It feels like a deliberate strategy of degradation. The hunger has now transcended mere discomfort. It is a physical entity, a predator clawing at the lining of Anneliese's stomach. It makes her dizzy when she stands too fast. It fills her dreams with visions of her mother's kitchen, the smell of roasting potatoes, the sight of a perfect loaf of rye bread, the sound of sizzling sausage. She wakes with a gasp, the phantom tastes turning to ash in her mouth. She sees the hunger in the faces around her. It has carved new lines into the faces of the older women and stolen the youthful plumpness from the cheeks of girls like Leni. It makes tempers short and words sharp. A dispute over a dry patch of ground can escalate into a screaming match. A dropped piece of kindling is a catastrophe. On the 3rd day in the enclosure, a new sound breaks the monotony. It begins as a low rumble in the distance, growing steadily louder. It is not the sound of artillery or aircraft, the familiar soundtrack of the war. It is the grinding groan of heavy trucks. A wave of motion passes through the enclosure. People stir, getting to their feet, their eyes fixed on the main gate. Hope, a dangerous and almost forgotten emotion, flickers to life. Food, Leni whispers, the word a prayer. They're bringing food. The rumor spreads like wildfire, a current of electricity through the exhausted crowd. The trucks, a pair of GMC 2.5-tonners, pull to a stop just inside the gate. The tailgates drop with a crash. American soldiers, members of a quartermaster unit, begin unloading large, steaming metal pails. The sight and, more powerfully, the smell that drifts on the damp air, is electrifying. It is the scent of something hot, something cooked. It is the smell of salvation. A line begins to form organically, a shuffling, desperate queue that snakes through the mud. There is no pushing, no shoving, not yet. There is a fragile, unspoken agreement to maintain a sliver of dignity. Anneliese, with Helga and Lenny in tow, joins the line. Her heart hammers against her ribs. She feels a lightheadedness that is part hunger, part giddy anticipation. She doesn't care what it is. It could be the thinnest turnip soup, the most watery gruel. It would be a feast. As they inch forward, the sounds of the camp change. The low murmur of despair is replaced by a tense, expectant silence, punctuated only by the clatter of metal lids and the barked orders of the American guards trying to maintain order. Anneliese is close now, close enough to see the steam rising in thick clouds, close enough to see the khaki-clad arm of a young soldier plunging a ladle into one of the pails. She holds out the small, dented tin cup that is her only eating utensil. Her hands are shaking. This is the moment. The end of the gnawing emptiness. The promise of life itself, ladled out of a pail. The line moves with agonizing slowness. Each step forward is a victory against the dizzying weakness that threatens to buckle Anneliese's knees. Private First Class Frank Miller of the 202nd Quartermaster Battalion is on the distribution line, his hands raw from the heat of the metal pails. He is 19 years old, a farmer's son from Ames, Iowa, and nothing in his life has prepared him for this. He had expected to see soldiers, hardened men who had fought his countrymen. He had not expected to see these women, their faces pinched and pale, their eyes holding a mixture of exhaustion and a pride so fierce it is almost frightening. He tries not to look at them directly. He focuses on the task: scoop, pour, move to the next. The steam from the pails fogs his vision, mingling with the persistent drizzle. The pails do not contain soup. They are filled to the brim with boiled corn on the cob, thousands of ears of it, procured from a captured German agricultural depot. To Frank, it is simple, hearty food. It's what you eat at a summer picnic. It is calories, pure and simple, and right now, calories are all that matter. Anneliese reaches the front of the line. The soldier in front of her is a boy, his face smooth and unlined by war. He moves with an efficient, detached air, not meeting her eyes. He plunges a pair of tongs into the steaming pail and pulls out a bright, glistening object. He drops it with a dull thud onto the small metal plate she holds out. Anneliese stares at it. It is a thick, yellow cylinder, studded with waxy, unnaturally large kernels. Steam rises from it, carrying a strange, faintly sweet smell. She has never seen anything like it served to a person. Helga, right behind her, leans in, her voice a disbelieving hiss. Was ist das? What is that? Anneliese can only shake her head. She has seen this before, but not on a dinner plate. She has seen it in troughs, in buckets, in sacks stored in her grandfather's barn. Helga's eyes widen in horrified recognition. Maize, she breathes. Das ist Tiermehl. Corn. That is animal feed. The words hang in the air, a drop of poison in the well of hope. It is Futtermehl, the coarse, hard corn grown to fatten pigs and cattle. It is not for human consumption. A wave of bitter understanding washes over Anneliese, colder than the rain. This is not sustenance. This is a final, calculated humiliation. They are not even being given the dignity of prisoners' rations. They are being fed like livestock in a pen. The thought is so vile, so degrading, that it momentarily eclipses her hunger. She looks down at the yellow cob on her plate. It feels like an insult made manifest, a symbol of their utter defeat and dehumanization. The line behind her has stalled. A murmur ripples through the crowd as the women see what is being offered. Faces harden. Looks of disbelief turn to expressions of cold fury. One woman, a stout, middle-aged nurse, shoves her plate back at the American soldier. "Neen," she says, her voice shaking with rage. "We're sind kein Tier. We are not animals." She turns and walks away, her back rigid. Another follows her lead, and then another. They drop their plates on the muddy ground, the yellow cobs rolling into the filth. The protest is silent but absolute. They would rather starve than submit to this final degradation. PFC Miller watches, bewildered. He doesn't understand. It's food. Hot food. Why are they throwing it away? He glances at his sergeant, a weary veteran named Kowalski, who just shrugs. "Just keep serving, Miller. They'll eat when they're hungry enough." Helga turns to Anneliese, her face a mask of contempt. "Are you going to eat that pig slop?" she spits, her own plate empty by her side. "Let them see we still have our pride." Leni, the young girl, is crying silently, her small body trembling. The hope has been snatched away, replaced by a terrible choice, starvation or humiliation. Anneliese looks from Helga's defiant face to Leni's terrified one. She looks at the hundreds of women turning away, choosing hunger over shame. And then she looks down at the corn in her hands. It is heavy. It is warm. The heat seeps through the thin metal plate into her frozen fingers. Her stomach gives a violent, painful cramp, a physical scream that drowns out the voice of her pride. The sweet, unfamiliar smell fills her nostrils. It is not the smell of an insult. It is the smell of something that could keep her alive. Her mind is a battlefield. Pride versus biology. Dignity versus survival. The entire camp seems to hold its breath, watching her. The young American soldier, Miller, pauses his work, his tongs hovering over the pail, his eyes fixed on her, waiting to see what she will do. Time seems to slow. The drizzle feels like individual needles on Anneliese's skin. The low murmur of the camp fades into a dull hum, and all of reality contracts to the object on her plate. This yellow thing. This offering. This insult. Helga's words echo in her ears, pig slop. Anneliese's entire upbringing, her sense of self, of German Kultur, screams that to eat this is to accept the label of animal. It is to surrender the last bastion of her identity. She remembers meals at home, even during the leanest years of the war. There was always order. A clean tablecloth, meager as the food upon it might be. A proper knife and fork. There was a ritual to it, a small act of civilization that held the chaos at bay. This is the opposite of that. This is tearing at food with your hands and teeth, like a beast in a field. Her gaze drifts to the American guard, Private Miller. He is still watching her. There is no malice in his eyes. Only a deep, uncomprehending confusion. He cannot possibly understand the cultural chasm that separates them, the significance of this specific food. To him, it is just corn. To her, it is a judgment. But then, another memory surfaces, sharper and more urgent. It is from 2 weeks ago, during the chaotic retreat. A young soldier from her unit, a boy named Klaus with bright blue eyes, dying by the side of the road. Not from a bullet, but from a gut wound that had turned septic. His last words had been a delirious whisper for water and a piece of bread. He had died hungry. Everyone was hungry. Hunger was the true victor of this war. It had conquered them all long before the Americans arrived. Pride did not fill an empty stomach. Dignity did not stop the body from consuming itself. Anneliese looks at Leni, who is watching her with the desperate, pleading eyes of a lost child. Lenny will not eat unless someone else does. She will starve out of fear and confusion. Annalise's training as a signals auxiliary was about one thing: ensuring the message got through. The message was everything. And right now, the most fundamental message her own body is sending her, screaming from every cell, is the will to live. Slowly, deliberately, Annalise lifts the cob from the plate. It feels clumsy and heavy in her hand. The steam warms her palm. The women around her fall silent. Even Helga stops her muttering. PFC Miller leans forward slightly, his posture tensing. For a moment that stretches into an eternity, Annalise simply holds it, studying the rows of kernels. They are not like the hard, dried pellets for the farm animals. They are plump, swollen with water, almost glowing in the bleak light. She raises it to her mouth. The smell is stronger now, sweet and earthy. She closes her eyes, shutting out the mud, the wire, the staring faces. She is alone with the choice. With a final, decisive movement, she takes a bite. The sensation is a shock. The tough outer skin of the kernel bursts under the pressure of her teeth. A jet of hot, starchy liquid floods her mouth. It is not hard and grainy like animal feed. It is soft, almost creamy. And it is sweet. Impossibly, wonderfully sweet. A wave of flavor, simple and profound, washes over her tongue. It is the most delicious thing she has ever tasted. Her eyes snap open. The sweetness is real. The substance is real. This is not an insult. This is food. Real, life-sustaining food. She takes another bite, more certain this time, tearing a row of kernels from the cob. The physical act of chewing, of swallowing, is a revelation. It is a reawakening of a part of herself she thought had died. The gnawing emptiness in her stomach begins to recede, replaced by a warm, spreading comfort. She is so focused on the corn, on the explosion of sensation, that she is barely aware of the effect her action is having. A gasp goes through the watching women. A few feet away, a woman who had thrown her corn to the ground bends down, wipes the mud from it with the sleeve of her coat, and hesitantly takes a bite. Her expression mirrors Annalise's, shock, followed by ravenous relief. Then another woman steps forward to the pail. And another. The dam of pride has been broken by a single, desperate act. Lenny, seeing Annalise eat, timidly picks up her own cob and nibbles at a kernel. Her eyes fill with tears, but this time, they are tears of gratitude. Helga stands frozen, her face a mixture of disbelief and grudging respect. She watches as the silent protest collapses into a desperate, hungry crowd. The clatter of plates and tongs resumes, faster now. PFC Miller watches Annalise, a flicker of understanding dawning in his eyes. He doesn't know the whole story, but he saw the choice. He saw one woman's courage, or desperation, turn the tide. He sees her not as prisoner number so and so, but as a person who was starving and now is eating. For the first time, a fragile, invisible thread of connection is woven across the wire. The air is no longer filled with the silence of defiant pride, but with a new sound, the quiet, desperate, life-affirming sound of chewing. The sound spreads through the women's enclosure like a rising tide. The rhythmic, almost frantic sound of hundreds of women eating. It is a sound of pure survival, raw and stripped of all pretense. It is the sound of life refusing to be extinguished. Annalise Schmidt finishes her cob of corn, meticulously gnawing every last kernel from its core. The warmth in her stomach is more than just physical nourishment, it is a rekindling of a pilot light that had nearly gone out. When she looks up, she sees the world differently. The gray sky seems a little less oppressive. The faces around her are no longer just masks of despair. They are the faces of fellow survivors. Helga is now in the line, her back to Annalise, but her stiff posture is answer enough. She has made her choice. Pride is a luxury none of them can afford. When she gets her corn, She eats it quickly, without ceremony, as if trying to get the act of surrender over with. But she eats it all. In the days that follow, the corn becomes the new reality. It arrives each day in the same steaming pails, delivered by the same weary American quartermasters. It is never enough to feel full, but it is enough to keep the gnawing hunger at bay. It is enough to live. The women learn its rhythms. They learn to eat it slowly, to make the sensation last. They discover that the core, when scraped with a sharp stone, yields a last bit of starchy sustenance. It becomes the singular focus of their existence, the anchor point of their long, monotonous days. Anneliese finds that her status has subtly changed. The other women look at her differently. They don't speak of the first bite, but it is there, an unspoken acknowledgement in their eyes. She did not lead them, not intentionally, but her simple, desperate act had given them permission to live. They come to her with small disputes, with questions she cannot answer. She becomes a reluctant center of gravity in their small, broken community. PFC Frank Miller, back on the distribution line, now looks for her. He learns to recognize her face in the crowd. He sees the quiet dignity she maintains, the way she ensures Lenny gets her share before eating her own. One day, as she approaches, he spots a particularly large, well-formed ear of corn in the pail. With a movement so quick it is almost imperceptible, he uses his tongs to select that specific one and place it on her plate. Their eyes meet for a fraction of a second. No words are exchanged. No smile. But in that glance, there is a flicker of mutual recognition. He is no longer just a faceless khaki uniform, and she is no longer just a gray-clad prisoner. They are two young people on opposite sides of a vast, incomprehensible catastrophe, sharing a moment of simple, human decency. It is a tiny gesture, meaningless in the grand scale of the war, but in the muddy field of the enclosure, it feels monumental. The corn does more than just feed their bodies. It changes their perception. The initial belief that it was a deliberate humiliation, an act of psychological warfare, begins to fade. They see the young, tired faces of the American guards. They see their own overwhelming numbers. They begin to understand, in a dim, fragmented way, the sheer logistical impossibility of the situation. The corn is not an insult. It is what is available. It is the food of a nation far away, a nation that grows so much of this strange, sweet grain that it can afford to ship it across an ocean to feed its conquered enemies. The realization is a quiet one, dawning on them slowly. The Americans are not the demonic monsters of Goebbels' propaganda. They are not the benevolent saviors of their own newsreels. They are just men, overwhelmed by the victory they have won, doing the best they can with what they have. The corn, once a symbol of their degradation, becomes a strange symbol of their enemy's power, a power that is not just military, but agricultural, logistical. A power so vast it is almost impossible to comprehend. Weeks later, Anneliese would be transferred to a more permanent camp, one with wooden barracks and actual kitchens. She would eat thin soup and hard bread, food that was recognizably human. But she would never forget the taste of that first bite of American corn. It was the taste of desperation, of surrender, of survival. It was the taste of a single moment when pride was weighed against life, and life, sweet and tenacious, had won. Looking out through the barbed wire on her last day in the enclosure, she watches the sun break through the clouds for the first time in weeks, casting a pale, watery light on the fields of mud. The war had taken everything from her: her country, her uniform, her future. But in this squalid pen, surrounded by misery, she had been given something back. Not hope, not yet. But a foundational, biological truth. A reminder that even after the world ends, the simple, desperate, powerful instinct to take the next bite, to see the next sun rise, remains.